Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia. This story is one I never thought I'd share, but I realize now that if my story can help even one person rethink a moment of temptation, it'll be worth it. It's a story of love, mistakes, and facing the pain that comes from not recognizing what we have until we've almost lost it. Please bear with me. It's deeply personal, but here it goes. Mark and I were married for nearly 10 years. 10 years filled with love, routines, shared dreams, but also the everyday responsibilities that slowly took over our lives. Somewhere along the way, it was like we started living parallel lives, busy with work, keeping up with family obligations, paying bills. We had drifted into this quiet rhythm, and it was like the spark, the intimacy we'd once had faded without either of us realizing it. I missed how he used to look at me, how he'd make me laugh, but I told myself this was just what marriage looked like after years together. I felt lonely, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. One night, I went to a friend's party. Mark was tired and decided to stay home, so I went alone. I'd been looking forward to the chance to dress up, to just have a night out, and for the first time in ages, I felt alive. Free. I hadn't felt like me in so long. Just Patricia, not the wife or the responsible one. And that's when I met James. James was charming, friendly, and had this carefree energy that drew me in. We started talking, and it felt so easy, so natural. He asked me about my work, my life, and my dreams in a way that made me feel genuinely seen and heard. And the way he looked at me, well, it was like he saw a side of me that had been forgotten. That night, I remember driving home with this strange, fluttering feeling, like something had been stirred awake in me. It felt dangerous. And yet, I wanted more. Over the next few weeks, James and I kept in touch, at first with casual texts, and then longer conversations, sometimes late into the night. I started looking forward to those moments, those secret messages that felt like my own little escape. I kept telling myself it was harmless, that it was just a friendship. But deep down, I knew it was wrong. I was lying to myself and ignoring that small, nagging voice that warned me I was heading down a dangerous path. One afternoon, I invited him over, telling myself it was just for coffee. Just to talk, I reasoned. But as soon as he was there, the air was charged with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. We sat close, too close, and he took my hand in his. In that moment, I forgot about everything else. I didn't think about the life Mark and I had built together, the trust he'd placed in me, the love we'd shared. All I felt was the thrill of the moment, the excitement of doing something forbidden. But then, just as things were becoming more intense, I heard the front door open. My heart froze. Mark was home early. Panic gripped me as his footsteps got louder. Then, there he was, standing in the doorway, looking at us. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. Shock, pain, and betrayal, all mingling in a single, crushing moment. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, like he was staring at a stranger. And then he turned and walked away. After James left, I sat alone, paralyzed by shame. I kept seeing Mark's face in my mind, the hurt in his eyes, and I knew that I'd shattered something precious. I wanted to reach out to him, to say something, but I couldn't find the words. How could I explain the choices I'd made? How could I justify the way I'd taken him for granted? The days after were the hardest of my life. I tried to talk to him, to apologize, but Mark couldn't even look at me. The silence in our house was suffocating. Nights were the worst, lying beside him, knowing I'd hurt him, feeling the chasm between us. I lay awake for hours, replaying every moment, asking myself how I'd let things get this far. Slowly, we started to talk. Those first conversations were brutal, filled with accusations, questions I had no answer for, and tears I didn't know I had left to cry. Mark wanted to know why. Why I'd risked everything we had. Why I'd turned to someone else instead of him. And I had no good answers. I'd let myself believe that our marriage was just comfortable, and that maybe excitement and passion were for other people. I'd taken him for granted, let resentment build up without saying a word, and in doing so, I'd betrayed the person who meant the most to me. In the months since, we've worked hard to rebuild what I nearly destroyed. Some days are better than others. There are times when he'll look at me, and I can still see the hurt in his eyes, the wound that hasn't fully healed. And every time I feel the weight of my actions, the guilt of what I put him through. But we're trying, slowly, painfully, but we're trying. This experience has taught me how fragile trust can be, how easy it is to take love for granted. Real love isn't the thrill of a secret meeting or the excitement of new attention. It's showing up every day, even when things aren't perfect, even when the spark isn't blazing as bright as it once was. I'd lost sight of that and let myself believe that fleeting excitement could fill the void I felt. So to anyone listening, if there's something missing in your relationship, don't look for it elsewhere. Talk to your partner. Be honest. Be vulnerable. Even when it's uncomfortable. I lost sight of what mattered, but every day now, I'm working to prove to Mark that I'm committed to making this right, to rebuilding the trust I shattered. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you of the value of what you already have, before it's too late. After all of that, I'm still working on rebuilding the trust we once had. Some days it feels like we're making progress, and other days it's like there's an invisible wall between us. I understand now that healing is a slow process. It isn't something that can be forced or rushed. I have to be patient and keep showing him in every little way that I'm committed to making this work. We've gone to counseling, and even though it's tough to sit there and face the reality of what I did, it's helped us both. Counseling has shown us how we each contributed to the distance that formed between us. We both had moments of realization, where he admitted he'd let his work take over, and I shared how lonely I'd felt, how I craved the connection we'd once had. It doesn't justify what I did, but it helps us understand each other a little better. Sometimes Mark opens up to me about his own feelings, the pain, the doubts, the nights he lay awake wondering what he did wrong, and if he could ever truly forgive me. And even though it hurts to hear him relive those moments, I'm grateful that he's talking to me about them. Every time he lets me in, even if it's just a bit, it's like a small step forward. There are moments now, little glimmers where he'll smile at me like he used to. We've found a new appreciation for each other, and we're both making the effort to prioritize our relationship in ways we never did before. We make time for dates again, for real conversations where we talk about everything, even the small, everyday things we used to ignore. It's like we're learning how to be partners all over again. One day, Mark took my hand and said, "I want to forgive you." I'm trying to let go of the past, but it's going to take time. That moment broke me, not out of sadness, but because it was the first time I truly felt hope. Hope that we could get past this. That one day, we might look back on this as something that made us stronger. So, if you've ever been in a place where you've made a terrible mistake, I hope my story reminds you that there's a chance to make things right. It's not easy, and it's not a guarantee, but with patience, honesty, and a lot of humility, there's a path forward. Sometimes the hardest battles we face are with ourselves, in accepting our flaws and forgiving ourselves. But if we're willing to do the work, we just might find a way to heal and rebuild. Thank you for listening and for letting me share my journey. It hasn't been easy, but if sharing my story helps someone out there hold on to what's precious in their own life, then it's been worth it.